If you have ever wondered why one text message can calm your entire nervous system, or why the absence of someone can feel like physical withdrawal, this conversation is for you. Because relationship dependency is not weakness or romance gone wrong, but a deeply wired psychological pattern that shapes how men and women attach, desire, fear, and sometimes lose themselves in love. Relationship dependency between men and women begins long before adulthood, rooted in early attachment experiences that silently program how safety, intimacy, and validation are sought later in romantic bonds. And when two people come together, they are not just choosing each other. They are unconsciously negotiating unmet needs, emotional wounds, and survival strategies learned in childhood. For many women, dependency often forms through emotional attunement, where closeness, communication, and reassurance become the primary sources of security, not because women are naturally dependent, but because society and early caregiving often reward emotional sensitivity and relational focus, teaching the nervous system that love equals connection and presence. For many men, dependency can appear more hidden, often masked by independence or emotional distance, yet it frequently emerges through purpose, admiration, sexual validation, or being needed, where intimacy becomes tied to identity and worth rather than emotional expression. These differences are not biological destiny, but adaptive responses to early environments, where boys may learn to suppress vulnerability to maintain approval, while girls may learn to maintain harmony to feel safe. When these patterns meet in adult relationships, dependency can form quietly and powerfully, especially when one partner becomes the primary regulator of the other's emotional state, creating a loop where reassurance, attention, or validation becomes necessary to feel stable. This is where love can begin to feel intoxicating, because the brain releases dopamine and oxytocin during closeness, reinforcing the bond not just emotionally, but chemically, making the partner feel essential rather than chosen. Over time, dependency can deepen when personal identity starts shrinking around the relationship. When moods rise and fall based on the partner's availability, and when boundaries blur in the pursuit of connection. In heterosexual dynamics, this often plays out through anxious and avoidant attachment cycles, where one partner seeks closeness to soothe fear, while the other pulls away to protect autonomy, unintentionally intensifying dependency on both sides. The anxious partner becomes dependent on reassurance, while the avoidant partner becomes dependent on distance to feel in control, creating a paradox where both are emotionally hooked yet unsatisfied. Sexual intimacy further amplifies this bond, because sex is not just physical, but a powerful emotional language, capable of temporarily dissolving insecurity and creating the illusion of complete union, which can make dependency feel like passion rather than imbalance. Many men experience dependency most strongly through sexual connection, where desire and performance become tied to self-worth, while many women experience it through emotional closeness, where feeling chosen and prioritized validates their sense of value, yet both experiences stem from the same core need to feel enough. Cultural narratives about romance often glorify this fusion, teaching that true love means needing each other completely. But psychology reveals that excessive dependency erodes attraction, authenticity, and long-term stability. When one partner becomes the emotional center of the other's world, pressure builds, resentment grows, and desire subtly fades, because healthy intimacy requires two whole individuals choosing connection, rather than two incomplete selves seeking rescue. Dependency also thrives in unresolved trauma, where past abandonment, neglect, or inconsistency makes the nervous system hypervigilant, scanning for signs of rejection and clinging to any source of perceived safety. In these cases, the partner is no longer just a lover, but a regulator of fear, a stand-in for unmet childhood needs, and losing them feels like losing oxygen rather than losing a relationship. Understanding this does not mean blaming oneself or one's partner, but recognizing that dependency is a strategy, not a flaw, developed to survive emotionally, and strategies can be updated when they no longer serve growth. Awareness is the first rupture in the cycle, because once dependency is seen clearly, its power begins to soften, making room for conscious choice instead of unconscious reaction. This first part lays the psychological foundation for understanding why dependency forms, how it differs between men and women, and why it feels so compelling. And if you want me to continue into the deeper dynamics of control, fear, desire, and how dependency quietly shapes behavior, in long continuing from where we left off, once we recognize the roots of relationship dependency, we begin to see how it manifests in daily life in ways that feel subtle, almost invisible, yet profoundly impactful on intimacy. For example, many women unconsciously monitor a partner's mood, tone, and attention, calibrating their own behavior to maintain closeness, which creates a pattern of responsiveness that feels caring, but is actually a nervous system strategy to avoid perceived abandonment. This responsiveness often translates into excessive thinking about what the partner feels, anticipatory anxiety, or an almost compulsive need to interpret every word or silence as a signal of relational safety. Men, on the other hand, may experience dependency as pressure to provide, perform, or solve problems, seeing love as something earned rather than freely given. This can make men emotionally distant at times, creating a feedback loop where women's anxiety rises and men's withdrawal reinforces the perception that closeness is conditional. Over time, these cycles deepen because the nervous system learns that tension, pursuit, and reconciliation are the emotional equivalents of connection. The chemistry of these interactions is compelling. Dopamine spikes during the pursuit phase, oxytocin surges during closeness, and even stress hormones like cortisol can intensify feelings of attachment, which is why dependency often masquerades as passion. One of the most insidious aspects of this dynamic is how it can distort sexual intimacy. Dependency turns sex into more than a physical act. It becomes a measure of worth, a currency of love, and an emotional anchor. Women may feel reassured through sexual responsiveness and attention, while men may feel validated through desire and conquest. And when these patterns repeat over time, sex can inadvertently reinforce dependency, making separation or even minor conflicts feel unbearable. Emotional regulation also becomes outsourced in dependent dynamics. Instead of developing self-soothing mechanisms, individuals rely on their partner to calm fears, quiet insecurities, and provide stability. This is not inherently unhealthy in small doses, as humans are wired to co-regulate. But when co-regulation becomes the primary method of emotional survival, the relationship becomes a pressure cooker. Arguments can escalate quickly, because what might appear as minor disagreement is experienced as existential threat. A partner's absence or criticism feels catastrophic, and jealousy or possessiveness emerges as an instinctive defense rather than a choice. Importantly, dependency does not look the same across genders, though it exists in all forms. Women's dependency often surfaces through emotional engagement, communication, and relational vigilance, while men's dependency may be expressed through avoidance, workaholism, or control over physical or sexual aspects of the relationship. Both are attempts to regulate fear and uncertainty, and both can appear contradictory. The dependent partner is both clingy and forgiving. The avoidant partner is both distant and controlling, and the dynamic creates an invisible tether neither party can fully articulate. Long-term relationships often magnify these patterns because familiarity allows old coping strategies to re-emerge. Over time, partners unconsciously reinforce each other's dependency. As anxious behaviors trigger withdrawal, withdrawal triggers pursuit, and the cycle repeats. While these patterns can feel toxic, they also highlight something profound: humans are wired to bond deeply, and dependency is simply the nervous system's raw, unrefined method of securing love, validation, and survival. The good news is that awareness opens the door to transformation. By observing these patterns without judgment, individuals can begin to disentangle love from fear, desire from need, and connection from survival. Developing self-regulation, understanding attachment styles, and practicing authentic communication can slowly shift dependency into interdependence, where both partners maintain emotional wholeness while choosing connection freely. In this stage, intimacy becomes not about filling voids, but sharing abundance. And desire is fueled not by fear of loss, but by genuine attraction and mutual respect. Dependency also affects the language of love and conflict. Many arguments in dependent relationships are less about the immediate issue and more about existential anxiety, the fear that love could vanish, that approval could be revoked, or that the partner is not fully invested. Understanding this allows couples to reframe conflicts as opportunities to soothe the nervous systems rather than score victories or seek reassurance, changing the emotional landscape from tension to curiosity and empathy. Furthermore, dependency intersects with personal history, societal expectations, and gender norms. Cultural narratives often glorify sacrifice, emotional labor, and the idea that women should hold the relationship together while men should provide and protect, reinforcing unconscious dependency patterns. Awareness of these influences allows both men and women to challenge inherited assumptions and cultivate a relationship built on conscious choice rather than conditioned patterns. Sexual dynamics also play a crucial role in reshaping dependency. Conscious intimacy, where both partners express desire, vulnerability, and need openly yet maintain boundaries, transforms sex from a tool of validation into a language of connection. When both men and women feel secure in expressing needs and setting limits, the intensity of dependency diminishes, not because desire fades, but because attachment becomes a choice rather than a compulsion. By learning to self-soothe, recognize triggers, and articulate boundaries, individuals gradually shift from reactive attachment to proactive intimacy, where love is a shared experience and not a survival mechanism. Understanding the full psychology of dependency requires examining the neural underpinnings as well. The amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and reward circuitry all participate in attachment, fear, and desire. Chronic dependency can hijack these circuits, making emotional reactions automatic and often disproportionate. Recognizing the biological basis of these responses provides both compassion for oneself and clarity in how to cultivate healthier relational patterns. At the heart of it, dependency is a dance of longing and fear, attraction and insecurity, connection and individuation. It is neither inherently bad nor a flaw, but a signal that our relational strategies need conscious refinement. By exploring these dynamics, both men and women can learn to honor their attachment needs while cultivating autonomy, turning what once felt like helpless longing into mature intimacy. Continuing from part 2. Once we fully understand how dependency operates in relationships, the next step is exploring how it can be consciously transformed into a balanced, thriving connection without losing intensity, desire, or emotional richness. At its core, transforming dependency is about shifting from unconscious attachment to conscious intimacy. This begins with self-awareness, which means recognizing the subtle ways your emotions and behaviors are shaped by the presence or absence of your partner. For example, noticing when jealousy, anxiety, or compulsive reassurance-seeking arise not as moral failings, but as nervous system responses rooted in survival and early attachment experiences, allows individuals to pause before reacting. Women can begin to distinguish between the urge to fix relational tension or invest in emotional labor and the capacity to regulate their own feelings independently, while men can notice when avoidance, withdrawal, or focus on work or achievement is a strategy to manage internal anxiety rather than a reflection of disinterest. Developing these insights requires honesty, reflection, and often deliberate experimentation. Small acts such as creating space for oneself, honoring personal routines, and communicating needs clearly without fear of judgment slowly recalibrate the relational nervous system. Boundaries become a central tool in this transformation. Dependency thrives when boundaries are blurred or non-existent. When one partner's emotional state dominates the other's, autonomy is compromised. By establishing clear, healthy boundaries, each individual communicates that their love is a choice, not a necessity, which paradoxically increases trust, safety, and desire. Sexual intimacy is also recalibrated in this process. When dependency is reduced, sex is no longer primarily a tool for validation, but a dynamic language of mutual pleasure, curiosity, and vulnerability. Partners can explore desires without conflating performance with worth or closeness with survival, which deepens connection rather than reinforcing anxious attachment loops. Interdependence becomes the goal, where each person maintains their individuality while contributing to a shared emotional ecosystem. This allows passion to flourish, communication to deepen, and conflicts to be navigated without triggering disproportionate fear or reactivity. The neurological component of dependency transformation cannot be overstated. Practices such as mindfulness, breathwork, and emotional regulation exercises help retrain the amygdala and prefrontal cortex to respond to perceived relational threats with awareness rather than reflexive fear. Over time, this rewiring enables partners to experience love as a stabilizing, nourishing force instead of a roller coaster of need and withdrawal. Attachment repair is another essential component. Many dependent dynamics are fueled by unresolved childhood wounds, inconsistent caregiving, or early trauma. Therapeutic techniques, journaling, or reflective dialogue can uncover these patterns and allow them to be consciously processed, reducing their unconscious grip on adult relationships. When both partners engage in this inner work, the relationship becomes a laboratory of growth rather than a mirror of past pain. Communication shifts from reactive to proactive. Instead of blaming, pursuing, or withdrawing, partners learn to articulate needs, fears, and boundaries with clarity and compassion. This creates a relational rhythm where closeness is chosen, not demanded, and independence is celebrated rather than feared. Furthermore, dependency often distorts perception of attraction and desire. When one partner is overly reliant, attraction can paradoxically diminish, because desire thrives on a balance between closeness and autonomy. By cultivating personal interests, maintaining friendships, and engaging in meaningful work outside the relationship, both men and women enhance their individual value and presence, which naturally reignites mutual desire without coercion or pressure. Emotional regulation is reinforced through conscious self-soothing strategies. Techniques such as grounding exercises, journaling, meditation, and somatic awareness allow individuals to calm anxiety, process unmet needs, and experience security internally rather than outsourcing it entirely to their partner. This is particularly important because it turns the relationship into a choice-driven connection rather than a survival necessity. Importantly, transforming dependency is not about eliminating need entirely. Humans are wired for connection. The goal is not detachment, but conscious interdependence, where love is experienced fully without triggering compulsive behaviors, emotional hijacking, or unconscious control dynamics. Advanced relational skills, such as reflective listening, empathic attunement, and assertive communication, become critical tools. These practices ensure that each partner feels heard and valued without being trapped in the other's emotional turbulence. Conflict, which previously might have escalated dependency-driven anxiety, becomes an opportunity for growth, understanding, and connection rather than a threat to the relationship. Over time, this transformation profoundly changes the relational landscape. Dependency loops give way to a secure, passionate, and resilient connection. Desire remains vibrant because it is fueled by attraction and appreciation, not need. Emotional intimacy deepens because it is chosen, not coerced by fear. Both partners can thrive individually and together, creating a relationship that is sustainable, fulfilling, and deeply satisfying. The conclusion is clear. Relationship dependency between men and women is neither a moral failing nor a romantic ideal, but a deeply ingrained psychological pattern shaped by early attachment, neural wiring, cultural narratives, and personal history. Left unchecked, it can create cycles of anxiety, pursuit, withdrawal, and emotional turbulence. Yet when recognized, understood, and consciously addressed, it becomes a gateway to profound intimacy, desire, and personal growth. By cultivating self-awareness, emotional regulation, healthy boundaries, interdependence, and conscious communication, men and women can transform dependency from a source of insecurity into a foundation for thriving connection. Love then evolves from survival-driven attachment into a chosen, vibrant, and mutually nourishing experience, where both partners feel whole, desired, and free, creating not just a relationship, but a sanctuary of growth, passion, and deep human connection. This journey from unconscious dependence to conscious intimacy is not instantaneous, but it is transformative, offering a blueprint for relationships that are emotionally resilient, sexually satisfying, and profoundly fulfilling in the deepest psychological and emotional sense.